I'd like to start with sort of one of the last points that Hazem made about the BDS movement, and that's sort of this idea of context sensitivity, this idea that it's up for each individual group who agrees with the three aims of the campaign to do whatever that they feel is appropriate and tangible to them sort of in their local area. And the fact that this is a rights-based campaign rather than a solutions-based campaign means that broad coalitions of people can work together. So this context sensitivity, this people doing what makes sense in their area, and this rights-based approach means that we have a huge variety in the BDS movement, all sorts of different actions taking place under the BDS umbrella. Because I think some of the people here are new to BDS, I thought it would be a good idea just to run through 4 or 5 or 6 of the big BDS campaigns. And we're lucky in Sweden because one of the biggest BDS victories that I always talk about anyway, I don't know about Hassan, is took place in a group in Stockholm. You may be familiar with the company Veolia. Veolia collects the trash from outside my house, it runs water services, it runs transport services, and then in Jerusalem it runs a railway system between Palestinian East Jerusalem and Israeli West Jerusalem, and its role is to cement the Israeli hold on annexed East Jerusalem and cement Israel's hold on the Palestinian territories. So the BDS National Committee decided that this was a clear target for a campaign of divestment, to get companies to withdraw their funds or get local authorities to stop using Veolia. There were a number of local authorities that decided Veolia is complicit in Israeli violations of international law. It is not right for us to give them taxpayers' money for services in our local community. And there were a number of local councils, fairly small local councils, that took this decision. And then Stockholm City Council were going, there was a $4.5 billion contract that could have gone to Veolia. And they decided it could not go to Veolia. And this was a huge, billion dollar contract that Veolia lost out on directly because of their violations of international law and Palestinian rights. And this was a catapult in the Veolia campaign. Things started to snowball from here. So in Ireland recently, the Dublin City Council also made a similar decision and excluded Veolia from contracts of an equal size. And now some reports suggest that Veolia want to get out of this light railway system. And some reports suggest that they can't get out because they're contractually obliged to find a company of an equal size to replace them in this project. But if you were a big businessman and you saw what happened to one person who did this railway project, you wouldn't want to go in and be the person to replace them. So they're still involved in the project, but the pressure continues. And an example has been made of Veolia. The other great sort of divestment campaign that we talk about is surrounding Elbit Systems. And again, it's the successes in Scandinavia that we talk about as well. Elbit Systems is a company that makes security systems that are used in the apartheid wall, in the settlements, and supplies components that are used in IDF drones and various other IDF weaponry. A couple of small Norwegian banks started deciding that they could no longer hold shares in Elbit Systems. And as these small Norwegian firms began to trickle through, selling their shares in Elbit Systems, the Norwegian National Pension Fund also said, okay, we're going to follow the lead of these small banks. It would be unethical to invest national money in this Israeli arms company. And again, once there's a big victory like this, it rolls. So Danske Bank, the biggest bank in Denmark, made a similar decision. Several Dutch pension funds made a similar decision. And then last week, or perhaps the week before, Deutsche Bank, one of the biggest banks in Europe, also said, okay, even though we're so big, even though we're probably involved in all sorts of other nasty stuff, we hear these campaigns, we can't be involved in our systems anymore. So, we see through shareholder pressure, through very specialised groups who lobby very effectively with big companies, that really these corporations that profit directly from the occupation and are complicit in it and essential for the maintenance of apartheid and for violations of international law, they can be targeted and they can be hit where it really hurts. And when one of the biggest banks in Europe divests from an Israeli arms company, it's in the Israeli papers, it's in the European papers, it's in the financial press. People get to hear about it and people get to engage with the issues. So these are the victories we talk about when we talk about the divestment campaign. And we'll be talking more about the divestment campaign in one of the workshops later, when we're looking at the workshop that deals more generally with how to target big companies. The next sort of big area of BDS action is around the consumer boycott. So the BDS calls for a boycott of all Israeli produce. So people do stalls, they hand out leaflets, they explain why to boycott Israeli goods, they explain that this is an important form of pressure, it's the form of pressure that Palestinian civil society calls for. And then some people decided that they wanted to make a big show and dance of the consumer boycott. So we have Hillary with us, who's sort of one of the pioneers in the UK of this form of action, of the supermarket protest. In Malmo, the H&M protest, you dress up or you decorate yourselves and you demonstrate inside the supermarket. You're calling upon shoppers to boycott Israeli goods, and you're calling upon the owners of that shop to stop selling Israeli goods and to end its complicity with violations of international law and Palestinian rights. So this is a very vibrant campaign that everybody can get involved in. You can have letters to supermarkets, you can have people inside the supermarkets, or even as individuals. I always tell my friends, don't buy Israeli goods. My friend was buying a phone the other day, I said, don't buy a Motorola phone. Motorola use technology that helps establish and maintain the settlement. There's also, with the consumer campaign, a lot of lobbying, a lot of very effective lobbying takes place. Not many months ago at all, there was a coalition in Italy founded called the Stop Agretzko Coalition. Now, some of you might have heard of the company called Agretzko. It's a semi-state-owned Israeli export business that is the biggest exporter of Israeli goods and exports 90% of goods from illegal settlements in occupied Palestinian territory. So in Italy, this is a broad coalition of 50 organisations, including faith organisations, workers' organisations, NGOs, and sort of the core of the Palestinian solidarity movement. And they began spreading information and lobbying around settlement goods. And you have the co-op here in Sweden as well, with their sort of democratic procedures. So they began lobbying Co-op and Conad. These are two of the biggest Italian supermarkets. And 3 weeks ago, these two supermarkets said, we will no longer stock produce from Agretzko, we will stop selling settlement goods. This is a fantastic campaign. This is a huge success for the global BDS movement. This is mainstream supermarkets in a huge European country saying no, no more. Fantastic. In such a short space of time. Again, sort of dedicated people who just had the right information and had the determination to keep going. So this is the things that we talk about when we talk about the consumer boycott. Hassan talked just now about the cultural boycott. There are some complexities here and some complexities of the academic boycott. There is a separate section on that later, so we'll leave some of the details till then, I think. But just to say that the cultural boycott is really beginning to take off. Just as artists refuse to play in apartheid South Africa, artists are now beginning to see that if they decide to play in Israel, if they decide to go and play a concert in Tel Aviv and pretend that what is happening isn't happening, that it is as bad as, if not worse, than playing in apartheid South Africa, that they are normalising the occupation and they are normalising Israeli human rights abuses. So in recent months, Gil Scott-Heron, the well-known anti-apartheid campaigner, Elvis Costello, Santana, all said, no, we won't play. And just yesterday, I don't know if you guys know the two bands, one called the Gorillas and one called the Klaxons. They're both very big in the UK. Klaxons are rubbish, but the Gorillas are great. I used to listen to the Gorillas a lot. They both said, you know, we won't play this rap, but that was just yesterday. There's also the trade unions. We know, of course, about the excellent, the really inspiring action taken by the Swedish Dockers Workers Union to say, you know, to implement a blockade of Israeli boats and produce for a limited period of time. The South African trade union, COSATU, has issued a similar statement since the flotilla attack and is one of our biggest supporters. In the UK, 6.5 million unionised workers inside the Trade Union Congress. Their union, the Trade Union Congress, endorses some aspects of the BDS campaign and are receiving educational materials about it, and so on. Really, one of the vanguards of trade union support for Palestinians is the Irish Trade Union Congress, and we're very lucky to have Eamon from Trade Union Friends of Palestine in Northern Ireland here with us today. And he will explain some more about the process that they went through in order to build this fantastic solidarity. The solidarity that the Irish Congress of Trade Unions has is so strong that within 2 days of the flotilla attack, there was a very, very strongly worded, statement going out to all its members. There's one last form of, sorry.
No, just I don't know if everybody knows that the Swedish Dock Workers Union.
He said.
Yeah. So just to say that again, in case people aren't aware, there've been a couple of developments in Sweden. One of the most exciting of which is that the Swedish Dock Workers Union have said that they will not allow any Israeli ships or Israeli produce in or out of Sweden through the unionised ports for a set period of time. I forget the exact dates, but I think it's the 15th to the 25th.